The right wing has really no answer for the contradictions of free speech and free markets. Somebody's got to pay. Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. On the line with us is Patrick Hedger. Patrick is currently the Vice President of Policy at the Taxpayer Protection Alliance. Prior to that, he was a research fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute's Center for Technology and Innovation, and also served as the Director of Policy at the Koch brothers Freedom Works. And protectingtaxpayers.org is his current website. Pat Hedger 18, P-A-T Hedger, H-E-D-G-E-R 18 is his Twitter handle. And Patrick, welcome back to the program. It's been a while since we've talked. You published this piece in the Dispatch titled J.D. Vance. This is the guy who wrote Hillbilly Elegy and has now become kind of a political guy. Shows how the populist right adopted the logic of "you didn't build that." Give me a summary of the position that you're taking in this, Patrick.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of pointing out that there is a creeping authoritarianism that's occurring on the right, and I find it very concerning. It was in response to comments that J.D. Vance made on Tucker Carlson's program, and he was asked, what do you say to the arguments that Google is a private company and, Google as a stand-in for Silicon Valley and other major firms broadly? And J.D. Vance said, well, I just don't care. And that just shows just such a flagrant a disregard for the Constitution and how our government works. And for somebody that is all but a declared candidate for the U.S. Senate as a Republican from Ohio, to say that you don't care about how the Bill of Rights works, I don't see how you can swear an oath upon the Constitution and serve in office with that kind of mindset.
What am I missing here, Patrick? My understanding is that the First Amendment says that the government may not inhibit freedom of speech, except under obvious conditions like you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. It doesn't say that in the First Amendment, but that's how it's been interpreted by the courts over the years. But it doesn't say that you or I have an absolute right to, or are restricted, that if you or I own a corporation, like, if you owned Google or you have some little Google equivalent and you start censoring people or not displaying their posts, you haven't violated the Constitution. You're a private business. Google's a private business. Why should we worry?
Yeah, exactly right. It's nice to agree with you on some things here. That's the issue. They are trying to claim that Google or Facebook or any other media company it has to host this kind of speech. And really the laws that we have on the books right now, something like Section 230 and the First Amendment, is what protects the ability of Google through YouTube to make sure they don't have any pornography on their platform, to make sure it's for the most part a family-friendly place. Same with Facebook. And it allows that sort of experimentation between platforms to compete, right? You can find indecent content on Twitter, but you're going to have a harder time finding it on Facebook or a harder time finding it on YouTube. And again, that's these platforms exercising their First Amendment rights. If you're putting up Nazi propaganda on YouTube, they're well within their rights to take it down. And those are their rights, not just of speech, but of freedom of association. If they don't want to be associated with your content, they shouldn't have to be. And if you don't want to have me on your show, you don't have to have me on your show. I think if we erode the rights of the big corporations to have freedom of association, that weakens the rights that protect journalists and all of us and all of our freedom of speech.
So, interesting conversation. We're talking with Patrick Hedger, Vice President of Policy at Taxpayers Protection Alliance. If you're concerned about right-wingers being essentially censored, Trump was censored off Twitter, others being censored off YouTube, and I get that, then what's your solution to this? I'll tell you right up front. Mine is, I think that all of these companies should be basically no longer operating as monopolies. They should be broken up, particularly those companies that have acquired other parts, Facebook acquiring Instagram, for example, YouTube being acquired by Google, that each one of these operations, at the very least, should be a standalone company that just does what they do. And I've got over 100 years of antitrust legislation and enforcement to back me up on that. Back in the 50s, Brown Shoes and there was another shoe company. These two shoe companies were forbidden by the Supreme Court from merging because the merger would have controlled 6% of the market for shoes in the United States. Right now, Nike has 19% of that market. So we have really abandoned this. Isn't antitrust legislation, which then promotes participation of free enterprise participation and opens up marketplaces. After AT&T was broken up into 7 or 9 regional companies plus Bell Labs, Lucian Technologies, it not only massively increased shareholder value, it kicked off a huge wave of innovation across the United States as these companies started competing with each other, these former Bell companies. Isn't that the solution?
Oh, there's a lot I could address there, but to kind of stay focused on the First Amendment aspects, I get concerned about using antitrust as a political weapon, and that's what you see a lot of folks.
What's political
on the
about
right
this?
Are trying to. Well, they're concerned that Google is exercising its First Amendment rights, and that warrants Google being broken up. I would rather antitrust stay narrowly focused on promoting competition and ensuring consumer welfare.
But that's my point. If you broke up Google enough that people could get into that space and compete. And what I'm talking about is not saying Google has to divide into 16 different search engine companies, but what are they doing in the operating system business, for example? If you broke them up into all these separate companies, you would diminish the power that they have in any one company to use the synergy of all those other companies to maintain market dominance. I mean, part of YouTube's market dominance is the result of Google sending everything to it, right? The search engine part of it. So if you separated those things, it seems to me that, as a stockholder in Google, I'm not, but I mean, if I was a stockholder in Google, I would want that to happen because I'd end up with shares in all these different companies and there would be increased shareholder value. And your Republican colleagues who are all hysterical about being censored on YouTube would find that YouTube is not as powerful as it was, and competitors can come in that do share right-wing content. This is what we saw with Parler, for example, going up against Twitter, which is largely just one company now.
Right. So we have multiple companies that are independent of each other: Facebook, Google, Twitter, all the way down to, Shopify, I think, were banning Trump from their platform. So the number of platforms as an independent variable to trying to solve the speech issue is not going to cut it, because, again, you have a lot of folks that came to the same independent decision to remove Trump from their platform. And I want to respect their First Amendment rights, but I also want to respect
Parler
First Amendment rights from... So Parler didn't, and Parler was subject to multiple problems with web service providers, all the way from Amazon Web Services to the Google and Apple stores, because they refused.
But there are service providers all over the world who will give a platform to out of line right wing content that can be viewed in the United States. We're not censoring this at a federal level. What you're talking about is what you were just, applauding the other day or just a minute ago, which is, hey, businesses enforcing their own rules. By the way, we're 45 seconds out from the end till a hard break here.
Yeah, sure thing. I just want to say I agree with you. I think that services should be allowed to experiment and tailor their gardens the way they want, right? They should be able to offer the products and services and host the speech that they choose. And if people don't like it, they can go somewhere else.
But what happens when that speech becomes fire in a crowded theater?
Well, the fire in a crowded theater was that's Supreme Court precedent that no longer applies. I mean, the theater will kick you out, but you can't be arrested for it.
Yes, you can, actually. If somebody gets injured, you are liable for that injury.
No, it's not. That's an opinion that was
absolutely.
By courts.
If you yell fire in a crowded theater and somebody dies from being trampled and there was no fire, you could be held liable, Patrick. Come on.
It's a Brandeis quote that was overturned in subsequent court cases. So that's a precedent that no longer applies.